Hi there, it's JJ from the Stress-Free CPD team. Welcome to your reflection plan template, the Excel file that we sent through to you after purchase. I recommend that you open it up now so that you can follow along and become familiar with your own template. What I'm going to do is provide you with a high-level overview, and in doing so, I'm assuming that you've already watched the 24-minute video and so that you're familiar with the concepts. Right, your template has 6 tabs, an instructions tab, as well as 5 workings tabs. This instructions tab is something that you should read through. It provides an overview of the template and how the formatting works, similar to what I'm going to provide now, but in more detail. Within each working tab, we've got a set of instructions at the top. These are the things that you need to do before working on the tab, as well as the steps to complete within the tab. Within all of the tabs as well, we have these yellow formatted prompts. So what happens is, as you fill in the template, these yellow prompts disappear or turn to green, indicated that you've completed what you needed to complete. We've also included links throughout the template. So the first of your working tabs is the planning tab. Here, the checklist is really the most important thing you want to be aware of. If you start from the top of this checklist, follow the links through to the different parts of the document, complete it, and then come back and indicate it that you've completed those parts of the document, you'll work your way through all of your documentation requirements as required by SAICA. The other important thing here is the current and aspiring role. Selecting what your current role is and your aspiring role is determines the proficiency levels for the different competencies on your self-assessment tab. So the current role was something you selected when you purchased the template. If you do have the wrong one, let us know and we can sort it out. But your aspiring role is something that you can select if you're moving into a new job soon, and it would be meaningful to think about the proficiencies you want in that aspiring role. If you're not sure or you can't remember what the archetypes and the role levels mean, we've included a link here through to the reference materials where we've got an overview of the different archetypes as well as the role levels. Next, the self-assessment tab. So once again, you want to start with the instructions, making sure you've done everything needed and that you're aware of the steps to follow within this tab. In this tab, we've got all of the competencies here down the side for your professional values and attitudes, your enabling competencies, as well as your technical competencies. These competencies are the ones that have been provided by SAICA. We've also included the definitions alongside them. These definitions also provided by SAICA. And then finally, we provided examples that we found within our reading of the material. So it's important to note that these examples of the different competencies have not been provided by SAICA, and they're not prescriptive. These aren't checkboxes, but rather they're examples that we found really helpful, and we thought that you might find really helpful to stimulate your thinking. Next thing you'll see here are the required proficiency levels for your current role, it's the role you're currently in, and your aspiring role, the one you selected in the planning tab. What you'll notice is all of these cells are grayed out. Anywhere in the template where you have gray cells, there are either hard-pasted values in there or formulas, and the idea is not to edit those. The first step that you really are doing is the self-assessment. And you know it's a step you need to complete because you've got this red text on the yellow background, as well as all of these blocks being indicated in white. And so you'll see I've already started filling some of these values in. The self-assessment is something you want to be doing typically at the beginning of the year. And you're asking yourself the question, what is my proficiency level for these different competencies? Am I a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 at the moment? If you're not clear on how to arrive at a 1, 2, 3, or 4, we've included a link to the reference materials where we have this proficiency level table. And so for each category of competencies, there are indications of what a 1 looks like, a 2 looks like, a 3 looks like, and a 4 looks like. And this is how you can do your self-assessment. What this looks like is working your way down this list and scoring yourself wherever you see you have a required competency. So perhaps I'm a 4 there, a 3 here. According to the table at the back, I think I'm a 3 here as well. And what you want to be doing in terms of best practice is leaving comments indicating how you arrived at the score that you did. So perhaps I'm assessing myself as such because it came up within my most recent performance review, or this is really a competency that I've been struggling with. All of that documentation can take place in this comment column. It's important to note that SAICA has been quite explicit in saying you don't need to include every single competency in your assessment or reflection plan. This is why we have the archetypes and role levels, so that the competencies more specific for you are the ones that you're considering. But you might be thinking, ooh, what if it's not quite a snug fit for my career and my path? There's maybe a competency here that isn't really relevant for me, or 1 or 2 that might be missing. If this is the case, it's important to remember that this is just a template and that you are more than welcome to adjust them. This must be useful for you, I think is the overarching principle from our side and our understanding of SAICA. This is not a checkbox exercise, and you thinking critically about the skills that you need, the competencies you want to develop, and how to get there is very much up to you. Right, so the next column here are these 2, where we start to flag potential development areas. So again, these are just formulas comparing your self-assessed score against the scores required in your current and aspiring role. The next step that you perform is where you start to select development areas. So I might select development areas for skills that I have sufficient proficiency, but I want to develop. And I should be selecting development areas anywhere where there is a gap. Again, you want to use the comments column to justify your choices. This is so that if you revisit this tab later, you can remember why you selected specific things and why you thought you needed to develop certain competencies. It's also best practice in terms of documentation should you be selected for monitoring by SAICA. After you've completed the self-assessment tab, the next tab is the refresh pivot tab. It is really, really important that you refresh this pivot table in order for your selected development areas to show in the rest of the spreadsheet. If you don't update this, you'll be working from an incomplete list, and that's going to cause headaches later. So please refresh this pivot table before moving on, and every time you make changes. The learning plan and reflection tab. Along the left side here, we have all the competencies that you selected as development areas in the current year, as well as the required proficiency level. So this is the highest of your current role and aspiring role, and your current proficiency level, your self-assessed one. The logic behind developing your learning plan is as follows. These are the competencies I want to develop, and each one of these competencies might have several topics that fall beneath it. So for example, thinking in an agile way might be one of the topics that I consider important in developing my adaptive mindset. Mindfulness might be one of the topics that I consider important in developing my emotional resilience. To grow in those topics and develop these competencies, I can plan learning activities to undertake over the next year. So the learning plan itself is a list of all of the learning activities you're planning to do this year. And so you select the competencies from this drop-down menu, for example, emotional resilience. It then flags it as green as something that I've addressed within my learning plan. So this is a checklist to make sure that all of the development areas I identified have been considered. I put in the topic that I want to undertake learning in this year, and I put in the learning activity that I think would be relevant in terms of that topic and developing the competency, as well as the dates that I intend to do it. After I filled this in, It indicates that my planning for that learning activity is complete. Now you might be asking yourself, what kind of learning activities can I undertake? Again, we have a link to the reference materials, where we've included a table showing the different learning elements and aspects of learning. So these 9 learning elements are the 9 triangles within the lifelong learning framework we introduced in the video. These aspects of learning are examples of the kind of learning that takes place within each one of these elements. And so this is a really rich list of examples of the kinds of things you can be doing when you're thinking about selecting learning activities. The next step is to actually undertake the learning activities during the year as you've planned, adjusting things if the dates move or adding new learning activities that you identify. Finally, the reflection part. You've done the learning. Did it help you develop the competencies that you initially identified? So what you fill in here is whether you've completed the activity as you complete it, the actual dates that the activity took place, and then your reflection. And this is 2 things. Was the learning effective? Did you grow in the way that you hoped and planned? And did you spot any further learning that you can do in this topic or competency? You can fill in the date as well. And your reflection for that activity is now considered complete. This process of identifying learning activities, undertaking them, and then reflecting upon them is something that's meant to be iterative. It's really best if you're using this throughout the year to tap into the benefits of the CPD policy. We've already covered most of the material on the Reference Materials tab. The last thing worth adding here is that if you're selected for monitoring, you need to submit your reflection plan. And that reflection plan needs to demonstrate evidence that you undertook several key steps that have been outlined by SAICA. What we've included here is a comparison of the steps required by SAICA and where they're evidenced within the template, so you can feel confident that your documentation requirements in terms of what SAICA needs to see is complete. The template is intended to be used on an annual basis, so 1 template per year. You know that you're done when you've got green yeses all the way through these steps that are meant to be carried out each and every year. Once this is all complete, we recommend that you store this template somewhere safe. If you're selected for monitoring, this is the evidence that you provide to SAICA. Just remember that SAICA can request up to 3 years worth of reflection plans, so this is not a document that you want to be losing. And that's it. If you've got any issues or queries, please feel free to shoot us an email. We are so grateful for your support. If you love this template as much as we do, tell your peers about stress-free-cpd.co.za or leave us a positive review on Facebook. Otherwise, keep things stress-free. Cheers.